My entire life and career has been destroyed, and I'll have to live with the fact that every conversation I have about chess will eventually discuss anal beads.
Ladies and gentlemen, after what felt like years at this point, and it has been years, we finally got the Netflix documentary that we have all been waiting for. But was it really worth it, ladies and gentlemen? That is a question we need to answer today. Lots of things to discuss. We'll discuss, of course, Netflix's relationship with chess. We'll discuss all that this documentary revealed to us. But also, we have to discuss the memes that are going to indefinitely be made about this documentary. And so, let's get right into it. There will be timestamps in the description or along the video to kind of indicate what I'm going to be talking about. But, first, let's start with Netflix, right? They continue to smash it with chess. Queen of Chess was an amazing documentary. Obviously, they did Queen's Gambit. They've now done this. I'm sure they will do Chess Project in the future. It is just so successful for them. There's a huge market for this. And it was really highly anticipated. I mean, a lot of people watched it, excepting, it seems like Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. And this came out at a good time because it's during the candidates. Obviously, Magnus isn't playing, Hikaru is, Hans isn't playing. So Hans was very vocal, bringing up all sorts of things that came up in the documentary. So go check out his Twitter. Constantly on there, banging the drum. And we'll talk about him in just a moment. To address the claim, firstly, that this documentary made everybody look bad, it's real life. Now, it did present Hans Niemann as someone who was wronged, but if you are like me, I find it really difficult to like Hans Niemann. He's a fantastic chess player. I just don't like his personality. I'm sorry. He's very aggressive, he's very arrogant, and he assumes he's always right. You can apply that terminology to a bunch of different players, perhaps even Magnus Carlsen himself. But Magnus Carlsen is a 5-time classical world champion. He's won like 20 world titles, so he's got the arrogance to back it up. He's got the record. In terms of the cheating scandal, if you don't know what happened, and you didn't know anything, you just knew anal beads.
My entire life and career has been destroyed, and I'll have to live with the fact that every conversation I have about chess will eventually discuss anal beads.
What does the chess world come to? Then this explains everything greatly. If you're a chess fan and you were following everything very closely at the time, this didn't reveal a great lot. What I learned was they settled the lawsuit out of court. I heard some rumblings about it, that it had got moved or it wasn't in the correct jurisdiction. But it seems like they settled out of court, which Magnus Carlsen didn't want to do, but that's what they did. I also didn't know the exact details, because I hadn't read the full report at the time, that Hans Niemann was, cheating. And then they gave him a new account just to help him, public facing. They closed his old account and he got a new one specifically for streaming. So that was interesting. And Danny Wrench, I'm sure, has done that with multiple people. And he seemed like generally, he was like, Hans, American. And they focused on chess.com, particularly in the pandemic, building careers. And that seemed like what they wanted to do with Hans. Hans, the Botes sisters, Levi Rosman, aka Gotham Chess, and Hikaru Nakamura. They were like, hey, would you like to do streaming? We're going to help support you and push your channels and so on and so forth. But yeah, then this happens. So they cover the Miami Cup. They speak about Hans and how he broke the record for the most amount of classical games in a year. He played 260 classical games or something like that. Gets invited to the Miami Crypto Cup, and he defeats Magnus Carlsen. Now,
this is the most simple and
he's resigned. Wow, what can I say?
What a result.
Phenomenal, right? Phenomenal.
What a result. Yeah, you said it, David. Incredible start to the day for Hans Niemann, the lowest rated player in the tournament, with the black pieces, a win against world number 1, Magnus Carlsen. And now I'm curious to hear some reactions from Hans in Miami.
Hans, yesterday was a terrible day for you, and today you start out with a masterpiece. How would you summarize it?
Chess speaks for itself.
Is it something special doing this against Magnus, Hans?
what they neglect is he did win one game, yes, and then did drop the infamous line, the chess speaks for itself. However, he lost the matchup to Magnus. They don't mention that. I watched it again. I went back a few seconds. I was like, wait, hang on. They didn't mention it. But that's like a thing, and Magnus was like, what? This shouldn't have happened. He's not as good as me. No one is as good as Magnus Carlsen. Not my words, exactly what he said. He's been the best player for over a decade now. And then they fast forward to the Sinquefield Cup. And Netflix, and the people they interview and the people they talk to, they make it clear. People were not happy Hans was there, and they were very suspicious of him already before the tournament. Now that is paranoia, a little bit, because they didn't have doubt. Hans Niemann then defeats Magnus Carlsen in that very infamous game at the Sinquefield Cup, and sends the chess world wild. Because Magnus Carlsen withdraws. And asks chess.com. Now, he was going to go talk to Hans, but Magnus's dad said, no, that's not proper. And ultimately, he spoke to Danny Wrench. They phoned up Danny, and they said, hey, what's going on? Because at this time, there was the merger between chess.com and all of the Play Magnus group, which was like 13 individual companies. Chess.com merging with Play Magnus at the app, but also Chessable and Aim Chess and things like that. The Magnus Corporation. So, had a very close relationship. And what ultimately happens is they kind of convince Magnus they have the smoking gun, and they don't. Magnus withdraws from the tournament. World goes wild. One of the things they focus on is the interview that Hans gives afterwards, where they're like, oh, his moves don't make sense, and, he lucked out, he checked the correct opening. What people forget is he couldn't explain his moves the day before when he played Alireza Firouzja. So, Hans not a great interview in terms of explaining his chess moves. His brilliance speaks for itself. Drop that Jeremy Clarkson meme in here somewhere.
Watch this. The wooden handbrake is holding me. I simply set off. Oh, yes. Sometimes my genius is... It's almost frightening. It's going to be a scorcher today. Oh, my God! Sometimes my genius is... It's almost frightening. Stupidest idea in history.
Yeah, and then things snowball out from there. The one other thing they kind of left out was the Jules Breyer Generations Cup, where Magnus Carlsen... It was like the tournament right after, and they were paired against each other, and Magnus Carlsen resigned in one move. He played one move and then resigned, and didn't play Hans. And they kind of go off of all of this and all these different sparring things and how he gets cleared ultimately by chess.com. Like, they file their Hans Niemann report, they mention all his online cheating, like over 100 games. But they say there's no evidence he cheated over the board. In that game, or in any of his, 261 games where he, shot up the leaderboard. And that just was like, oh, wow. And so... kind of after that, they move on, and then they fast forward to the Speed Chess Championship, where Magnus plays Hans and crushes him in 2024. Crushes him. They don't mention he crushed him. They just mention that Magnus won. This was kind of built up as the finale, and so I think this is a great point to go look at what other people had to say, and then I'll give you some more closing thoughts right at the end. But on Twitter, this is how Vasif Durali. Obviously, 10th of April, this is when they came out. #chessmates is a classic hero story. Protagonist Hans Niemann going up against the evil forces of Chesscom and to some extent Magnus Carlsen. The perfect ending would have been Hans winning the rematch for the full hero's journey. That didn't happen. The doc succeeded in painting Chess.com as villains, but wasn't Chess.com actually the first major organization to say no evidence of Hans cheating over the board? Why is everyone dismissing that? They could have kept that finding private and just leaned into that he cheated online, our algorithms proved it. They could have easily said their algorithms aren't designed for OTB games. Instead, they went out of their way to clear him over the board. That doesn't sound like an evil corporation to me. On the other hand, Carlsen clearly kept his vendetta and was ready to fight the legal battle till the end. He didn't see any wrongdoing on his own part, and perhaps he still believes what he believed back then, otherwise... did he want to fight it all the way? Why do you want to fight it all the way? So a lot of things going on. Obviously, there's a few things there from David Howe, and so on and so forth, and they're talking about the anti-cheating. Someone here comparing Magnus Carlsen to Vladimir Kramnik. There was this Twitter thread, obviously starting with a Hans Niemann post, Sindarov is a class act on and off the board. I'm very happy to see someone so talented and working hard dominate candidates. Someone says it's crazy that you can recognize class and still chose to be petty and play the victim for 4 years straight. Someone else makes a comment here comparing Magnus and Kramnik, and this guy says not comparable. Hans cheated in over 100 online games. Magnus had solid proof that Hans was a cheater. Kramnik's allegations were pure speculation. I completely agree with that take. There's Josh. Josh No Look does a great job here, where he responds to this one Hans Niemann tweet. Again, Hans Niemann very active on Twitter. Most people would be excited that chess made it to Netflix. This was in response to Hikaru Nakamura, who's not watching the documentary. I mentioned that earlier.
I think that's why he's here. So I don't know. You'd have to ask him. Okay. But and then what was the other question?
I just wanted to ask you about Netflix documentary which dropped like 2 days ago. Did you get to watch it? Like, how do you think that has come up, and what are people's responses about that?
Well, I mean, I don't know because I haven't watched it. Okay. I also haven't been on social media, so I have no idea. I mean, I would say what I said before on my stream yesterday after my game, which is from what I've heard about it, they don't really delve too much into the behind the scenes of how everything transpired, before the event, which is very disappointing. Because without that, I think people are lacking the proper context. But I have no intention of watching it. I don't. There's a saying. I know it's slightly different, so it's like paraphrasing. But they say you should never sleep where you work, or something like that. Or there's more crafts where they use specifically. But I would say that basically, like, I spend enough time on chess. Like, I'm not going to spend my free time seeing even more chess. Like, that has no interest to me whatsoever.
And someone said he cared enough to do the interview, put on a suit, etc., but his attempt to shape the narrative flopped, and now we're supposed to believe he doesn't care or that his values this time that little. Anyway, here is really funny. Interesting but very revealing segment from the documentary. Everyone wanted this to be true, and they've got the images here of Eric. One of the founders of chess.com. Everyone wanted this to be true. Everyone wanted this to be true. And I felt like I was in the chair in the end, ultimately at the end, saying, sorry everyone, like, this isn't what the data is showing. Yeah, so, like, they wanted it to be true. And Danny Wrench, here, there's Josh again, he's doing some good stuff on Twitter. Danny Wrench talks about building the chess content creator ecosystem, Hikaru Nakamura, Anna Rudolph, Alexandra Botez, Levi Rosman, etc. These are the same figures who amplified the anal bead circus, and especially in Nakamura's case, kept feeding OTB cheating insinuations about Hans. Chess.com soldiers doing their jobs to harass a teenage boy, a vile company with an equally vile lineup of influencers. Here's Hans responding to Agamata, who says, feels a bit weird Netflix left out the only big chess channel that actually stood up for Hans after the initial accusation. Guess it didn't fit the narrative at all. And he's referring to himself. There was lots of good stuff here on Twitter. Obviously, Hans talking about it and so on and so forth. And, ICC Chess Club commenting, David Lavida says he watched it. You might have your own sympathies, biases, and even interest in the story and its main characters. But as a journalist, I think the documentary does a brilliant job of presenting the story objectively, giving everyone their share of time to clearly explain their views in a fair way. Yes, all parties involved in this controversy made mistakes, and each of them admits it. I don't agree that it made everyone look bad. As I've already read in quite a few posts, it makes the story human. You have to walk in someone's shoes to judge them, and none of us have been in the main characters in this story. But yeah, what I'm going to leave it with, and I think this is one of the thumbnails, anal beads have been super good to us, says chess.com. So look, this whole story is wild. I made a timeline of it a while ago. It's one of the first videos I did on the channel. It's a completely wild story. It's an amazing documentary if you haven't seen it or you feel like revisiting it. Hans Niemann never gets his closure. He never beats Magnus Carlsen. He beat him once in that Sinquefield Cup, a game that will go down in infamy. Maybe it is his immortal game. But, like, he hasn't beaten him since. Magnus crushed him in the Speed Chess Championship final, beat him in the 2024, that same year, the World Rapid and Blitz, beat him in the Blitz knockouts. Hasn't looked back. Magnus still thinks Hans did something wrong in that game. We'll never know. We really won't. But there's not much you can do. So, this documentary was amazing. I think it is great. I think it's great, but kind of what we were promised. I don't think this delivered in terms of the chess world, what we were hoping for, what this was going to reveal. This was going to blow everything apart.
Well, Levy, I'm going under the detector first.
Yeah.
And I'm nervous.
I'm nervous too. I feel like I'm already gonna set it off.
I've always wanted to do one of these. One, because I wanted to see if I could trick it for myself, just know. And two, I don't know, because I'm a little bit of a masochist who enjoys, ooh, it's already moving. It's moving when I do things, man. So, what kind of questions are you gonna ask me? That's the question.
Some personal, some about me, some about Magnus, some about Hikaru, some about Hans Niemann. No.
I will address that currently there is a documentary being made. I am not allowed to say with who or when it's coming out, but we will not be getting into questions about Hans Niemann because of that. So for all of you fans who are now freaking out about that, that is the only reason we're not getting into those questions. You've already seen us address things.
It got delayed several times. I don't know if they had to reshape the narrative in the wake of the Daniel Naroditsky passing, in his passing away, if they wanted to reshape some of the narrative and some of the things, and they were like, Hans was wrong here. He didn't cheat, but he's not a great person. And he has cheated in the past, but not in this game. And they were like, his accusers, they were wrong. They didn't have the evidence, and they acted without thinking. You could see how those two tie in. I don't know if there is correlation there. It is speculation on my part, and I must emphasize that. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think about this documentary? I think it was amazing. I would love a part 2, but there's not enough information for a part 2. Netflix didn't even film. They didn't get the guys in after the initial story. You could see this was ready to come out in like 2023, early 2024. And then they delayed it. They got more footage after the Speeches Championship final, but they have to show clips from like behind the scenes. So obviously they were still filming, but they didn't have, Magnus's dad, Magnus, Danny, and Eric and Hans sitting in those all places where they were filming them, giving feedback. It was, very much just showing what was going on. A couple of conversations you could see that were happening on the way to the camera in Paris, France, where the SEC was taking place. And they showed a bit of Hans's interview with some of the people and with Levy and so on and so forth, and Magnus's interview with Levy during that event. Very interesting stuff. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the only person who knows if they cheated in that game is Hans Niemann. He maintains he didn't. Obviously, the anal bead scene, oh my gosh, it was so funny. Netflix, rightfully, they took the piss out of it. They made it look like the joke it was. They brought it up. Everyone had a good laugh. But it's serious. Hans is going to have to live with that, unfortunately, because some random person exfoliated it. Piers Morgan asked him about it. What can you do? What can you do, ladies and gentlemen? Let me know if you enjoyed the documentary. I think it was interesting, and I think I've got a lot more thoughts about chess.com, but that'll be saved for a new video coming out after the candidates, because we've got a bit of a chess war on our hands. Chess.com, Lead Chess, Take, and all the other companies starting up, and I'll be talking about that more then, so I don't want to spoil that video by giving all my thoughts here. In terms of documentary, brilliant stuff. But what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Let me know in the comments down below. That's what they're there for. Did you watch it? Did you enjoy it?